Most people pour a glass of orange juice every morning and assume it's the healthiest thing on the breakfast table. It's fruit. It's vitamin C. It's the drink doctors used to hand out with cold medicine. We looked into 9 of the most popular orange juice brands in America using independent lab reports, federal court filings, FDA records, and the brand's own ingredient labels and public statements. What we found is a pattern nobody advertises on the front of the carton. Juice that's marketed as fresh squeezed and pure is often deaerated, stored in massive industrial tanks for months at a time, sometimes up to a year, and then chemically reconstructed with flavoring before it ever reaches your glass. Independent laboratory testing has found trace amounts of glyphosate, the active chemical in Roundup, in some of the best-known orange juice brands on the shelf. A separate federal investigation once found an unapproved fungicide in juice already sitting in stores. And in more than one case, the company charging you the most for the word natural is the same company that has already been sued for using it, in some cases more than once. We're counting down 9 brands from concerning to genuinely surprising, and finishing with 3 brands that are actually worth pouring into your kid's cup. Let's get into it. Number 9. Great Value 100% Orange Juice. This is Walmart's house brand, the jug that fills carts because it's cheap, familiar, and always in stock. Here's the first thing worth knowing. Unlike several other major juice brands, there is no independent third-party glyphosate or pesticide residue testing of Great Value orange juice publicly available anywhere. Not from an advocacy lab, not from a university, not from a regulator. Walmart is one of the largest grocery retailers on the planet. At that scale, commissioning batch testing and publishing the results isn't a financial barrier, it's a choice. Compare that to what you're about to hear about other brands where the data exists precisely because someone outside the company paid to find it. The absence of a study isn't proof of contamination, but it does mean that when you buy the cheapest carton in the aisle, you're trusting a supply chain that has never had to show its work in public. No scandal, no lawsuit, just silence where the receipts should be. Number 8. Stater Brothers. This is a regional Southern California grocery chain, and its house brand orange juice actually posted the cleanest numbers of any orange juice brand independently tested in a widely cited 2017 lab report commissioned by the advocacy group Moms Across America. 2 bottles were sent to an accredited laboratory using UPLC MS/MS testing, the same method used to cross the report's full sample set. The results came back at 493 and 4.33 parts per billion of glyphosate. That's real, measurable herbicide residue in an orange juice carton. It is also the lowest of the 5 nationally available brands the lab tested that year. We're putting Stater Bros at number 9 specifically because the contrast matters. Even the best-performing conventional orange juice in that entire study still tested positive. There is no orange juice carton on a typical grocery shelf, organic exceptions aside, that tested at 0. Number 7. Signature Farms, the house brand sold at Vons, Safeway, and other Albertsons-owned stores. In that same 2017 lab report, 2 bottles of Signature Farms orange juice purchased at a Vons location came back at 633 and 5.78 parts per billion of glyphosate, slightly higher than Stater Brothers. Still within the range regulators consider well below the legal tolerance for citrus. Here's the part that doesn't show up on the shelf tag. Glyphosate is not typically sprayed directly on orange trees to ripen the fruit the way it's used as a pre-harvest drying agent on wheat. In citrus groves, it's used as a broad-spectrum weed killer sprayed on the ground beneath and between the trees. A 2010 USDA Agricultural Statistics report found that roughly 72% of Florida orange groves receive glyphosate treatments for weed control. The chemical runs off in irrigation water, rain, and grove soil, and residue has been measured in the finished juice as a result. Florida's own citrus industry group maintains that residues detected in juice sit far below the EPA's legal tolerance for the crop. Both things are true at once, legal and present. Worth understanding why it's there in the first place. Florida citrus growers have spent the better part of 2 decades fighting a bacterial disease called citrus greening, which has devastated the state's orange production, cutting the crop from roughly 200 million boxes a year in the 2000s down to a small fraction of that in recent seasons, according to industry reporting. Some growers and researchers have argued that heavy glyphosate used to manage grove weeds actually stresses the trees further and makes the greening problem worse, not better. Though the mainstream agricultural extension position is that greening is driven by an insect-borne bacterium, not herbicide use. Either way, Glyphosate has been standard practice in Florida citrus for decades, specifically because it's cheap and effective at keeping weeds down between rows of trees, which is a maintenance cost problem, not a ripening or yield-boosting technique. Number 6. Kirkland's Signature, Costco's house brand. Also part of that 2017 testing round, 2 bottles came back at 5.96 and 433 parts per billion. When the advocacy group that commissioned the testing sent letters to the CEOs of every brand involved asking them to address the findings, only one company responded at all. Costco wrote back, and its answer was that customers who want to avoid the issue can choose the organic options sold in Costco's own stores. That's not a denial. That's not a commitment to change how the conventional juice is sourced. It's a redirect to a different product on the same shelf at a higher price for anyone concerned enough to go looking for it. Number 5. Naked Juice. This is the brand built entirely on the idea of radical simplicity, bold lettering, a see-through bottle, the promise that what's inside is exactly what the name says. Naked Juice is owned by PepsiCo, distributed today through the Tropicana Brands Group. In 2013, the company agreed to a $9 million class action settlement after consumers sued over labels reading all natural, non-GMO, and 100% juice. The lawsuit, filed on behalf of a nationwide class in California federal court, alleged the juices actually contain synthetically produced ingredients, including calcium pantothenate and a soluble corn fiber additive, along with soy sourced from genetically modified crops. Naked Juice denied wrongdoing as part of the settlement, but agreed to drop the all-natural language from its labels and to independently verify its non-GMO claims going forward. If you bought a bottle between 2007 and 2013 believing naked meant nothing was hidden, the eventual court record said otherwise. Number 4. Minute Maid. Owned by Coca-Cola since 1960, Minute Maid is one of the 2 largest orange juice brands in the country, alongside its biggest rival. In 2 separate incidents, Minute Maid's history intersects directly with why orange juice testing became a national story in the first place. In late 2011 and into January 2012, Coca-Cola itself alerted the FDA that it had detected a fungicide called carbendazim not approved for use on citrus in the United States, in samples of its own orange juice and in the juice of its competitors. Carbendazim is legal to spray on oranges in countries like Brazil to fight a mold called black spot, but it has never been approved for that use domestically. The FDA responded by testing shipments at the border and detaining any found to contain the chemical above 10 parts per billion, the lowest level the agency's testing method could reliably detect, while stating publicly that the low levels detected in juice already on shelves did not pose a health risk and did not require a recall. For context on how low that actually was, the highest concentration the FDA found in any tested shipment that year was around 52 parts per billion, coming from Brazil. The European Union's own maximum allowable level for carbendazim in orange juice, by comparison, is 200 parts per billion, 4 times higher than the worst sample the FDA detained. In other words, even the most contaminated shipment intercepted at the U.S. border that year would have been legally sellable in Europe. The FDA ultimately detained roughly a quarter of the shipments it tested at the border in the weeks following the scare, while declining to pull any product already on domestic shelves. Separately, in that 2017 lab report, 2 bottles of Minute Maid came back positive for glyphosate at 13, 54 and 12, 65 parts per billion, roughly double what Stater Brothers and Signature Farms tested at. 2 different contamination stories. One brand, one very large parent company that self-reported the first one only because it had already found the second one in a competitor's product too. Number 3. Tropicana, the orange with a straw in it. The carton that built its entire identity on the words pure premium and not from concentrate. Tropicana posted the highest glyphosate numbers of any brand in that 2017 testing round, 26, 05, and 25. 12 parts per billion, roughly 5 times what the cleanest brand in the same study recorded. But the more consequential story about Tropicana isn't the lab results. It's what's inside the carton besides orange juice. Starting in 2012, more than 20 class action lawsuits were filed against Tropicana across the country, alleging that its 100% pure and natural marketing concealed a heavily engineered process. The core allegation, laid out in detail in the case Lewis v. Avold, Tropicana products, was that the company strips the juice of oxygen to extend shelf life, a process called deaeration, which also strips out the natural flavor and aroma compounds to make the juice taste like fresh orange juice again. The company adds back what the lawsuits describe as chemically engineered flavor packs, derived from orange peel oils and other byproducts, but manufactured separately from the juice itself. Tropicana holds multiple patents on file describing exactly this kind of flavor and aroma reconstruction, covering methods for processing orange peel byproducts into flavoring compounds, colorants, and what one patent filing describes as reconstituted peel juice. The lawsuits point to this patent portfolio as evidence that the flavor pack process isn't an incidental industry quirk. It's a formalized, engineered part of how the juice is made and protected as intellectual property. One of the lead plaintiffs had her request for class certification denied by a federal judge in 2018, and Tropicana has maintained throughout that its juice is safe and accurately labeled. But the underlying manufacturing process described in the litigation was never seriously disputed by the company. The juice is pasteurized, stored for extended periods, and then reflavored before it's packaged. In 2021 and 2022, PepsiCo sold 61% of Tropicana to the French private equity firm PAI Partners for roughly $3.3 billion, retaining a 39% stake in the new joint venture. The picture on the carton hasn't changed. The company standing behind it has. Number 2. Simply Orange. Also under the Coca-Cola umbrella, Simply Orange built its brand on the opposite promise from Tropicana. No concentrate, no flavor packs, nothing extra. Just orange juice the way it came out of the fruit. Class action litigation filed against the Simply Orange Juice Company made strikingly similar allegations to the Tropicana lawsuits. That the 100% pure squeezed language on the label doesn't reflect a juice that is deaerated, stored in industrial tanks for months at a time, sometimes cited in reporting as up to a year, and then reintroduced to flavor compounds derived from the fruit's own byproducts before bottling. The lawsuits argue that calling this process natural or pure squeezed misleads a consumer who pictures a glass filled straight from a squeezed orange. Coca-Cola has not conceded that the labeling is false. Reporting on the case lays out the actual production sequence step by step. Oranges are mechanically squeezed. The juice is deaerated to remove oxygen and extend shelf life. It's held in refrigerated storage tanks for an extended period, and only then is it blended with flavor packs manufactured from the fruit's own peel and oil byproducts to restore a consistent taste before it's packaged and shipped. None of those steps individually is unusual for a shelf-stable juice product. What's notable is that two of the largest, most trusted names in orange juice, owned by two competing beverage giants, have each faced nearly identical legal challenges over the same basic gap: what the label implies about freshness, and what the manufacturing process actually does to the juice before it reaches a store shelf. Number 1. Florida's Natural. If any brand in this list built its entire reputation on authenticity, it's this one. Florida's Natural isn't a corporation in the traditional sense. It's a cooperative, first formed in 1933, owned collectively by more than 1,000 individual Florida citrus growers across roughly a dozen grower organizations. The marketing leans hard on that structure. Real farming families, one state, one fruit, nothing imported. For decades, the not-from-concentrate flagship product delivered exactly that promise. Then, with little advance warning to consumers, the formulation quietly changed. As documented by the consumer watchdog site Truth in Advertising, Florida's Natural cartons now carry fine print describing the contents as a blend of Florida not-from-concentrate juice and orange juice sourced from Mexico. The company's own public FAQ explains why directly. Florida's orange crop, hit hard for years by citrus greening disease and shrinking acreage, can no longer meet consumer demand on its own. So growers added Mexican Valencia juice to keep up with orders. Some of the brand's other juice lines, according to reporting from Civil Eats, have also drawn on Brazilian concentrate. A federal class action lawsuit, Axon v. Deem, Florida's Natural growers, argued that the word natural in the brand name was deceptive, given that trace amounts of an herbicide were present in the juice. In 2020, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the dismissal of that claim. But the court's reasoning is worth sitting with. It ruled that a reasonable consumer wouldn't be misled by the brand name specifically because the word natural doesn't appear anywhere else on the packaging. And other label claims like 100% orange juice and not from concentrate gave enough context. The court did not rule that the herbicide traces weren't present. It ruled that the name alone wasn't legally deceptive. A grower-owned cooperative built for 90 years on the promise of one state and one fruit, now importing juice from 2 other countries to keep the cartons full, while surviving a lawsuit over its own name on a technicality rather than a finding of fact in its favor. The cooperative's own leadership has said publicly that the juice is still made from just one ingredient, oranges, with no additives or preservatives, and that framing is accurate as far as it goes. What it leaves out is where those oranges, or the concentrate made from them, are now grown. There's also a second, quieter shift worth knowing about. In 2025, federal regulators proposed updating the official standard of identity for pasteurized orange juice, lowering the minimum required sugar and solids content, called the BRICS level, in not-from-concentrate juice from 10.5% down to 10%. Florida lawmakers pushed for the change specifically because the state's own declining disease-stressed crop was struggling to meet the old standard using homegrown fruit alone. That's the brand at the top of this list, and it's the one most people would never have guessed. Before we get to the 3 brands actually worth buying, it's worth stepping back on the bigger picture here. Every glyphosate number in this list, even Tropicana's, sits well under the EPA's legal tolerance for citrus, and the herbicide's cancer classification remains genuinely disputed. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen back in 2015. The EPA's own risk assessments have repeatedly concluded that typical dietary exposure, including from juice, doesn't pose a measurable health risk. Bayer, which now owns the manufacturer of Roundup after acquiring Monsanto, continues to deny that glyphosate causes cancer while having paid out billions of dollars to settle tens of thousands of related lawsuits from agricultural and landscaping workers with direct, high-level occupational exposure, a very different exposure level than a morning glass of juice. Reasonable people land in different places on how much weight to put on trace residue in food versus occupational exposure at industrial volumes, and that's a genuinely contested scientific and regulatory question, not a settled one. What isn't in dispute is the second half of this story. The natural, pure, and fresh squeezed language on several major cartons has already been tested in court and in more than one case. The company changed its labeling rather than defend the claim all the way to a verdict. Lawsuits over marketing language aren't proof that a product is unsafe. They're proof that the marketing and the manufacturing process didn't match closely enough for a company to want a jury deciding the question. There's also a simpler, less argued about reason to think about how much orange juice you're pouring, regardless of brand. An 8-ounce glass of orange juice, even the cleanest, most additive-free bottle on this list, typically contains around 21 grams of naturally occurring sugar, with none of the fiber that comes from eating the actual fruit. That fiber is what slows sugar absorption when you eat a whole orange. Juice removes it. The American Heart Association's added sugar guidance doesn't even apply here, because this sugar isn't added, it's just concentrated by squeezing several oranges into a single cup. That's not a contamination story. It's a portion size story, and it applies to every brand on this entire list, including the clean ones coming up next. An organic, glyphosate-free, no preservatives carton of orange juice still delivers roughly the same sugar load per serving as a conventional one, because the sugar was never the additive. Nutritionists who raise concerns about juice consumption are almost never talking about a specific brand. They're talking about the fact that a full glass takes seconds to drink and represents multiple oranges worth of concentrated sugar with the fiber engineered out by the squeezing process itself, whole fruit or otherwise. Now, the 3 that are actually worth having in your fridge. Best option number 3. Trader Joe's Organic Orange Juice. This one doesn't come with a dramatic founder story or a viral certification seal. It's a single-ingredient product, organic orange juice, not from concentrate, pasteurized, nothing else on the label. It carries USDA Organic certification, which means it was grown without synthetic pesticides or herbicides, glyphosate included, and without genetically modified inputs. There's no added sugar because there's nothing added at all. It won't have the flavor consistency of a national brand that reconstructs its taste profile with flavor packs, and it can vary a little bottle to bottle depending on the harvest, which is actually a sign that it hasn't been engineered to taste identical year-round. If you want the simplest possible upgrade from a conventional carton without hunting down a specialty store, this is the easiest one to find. Best option number 2. Natalie's Orchid Island Juice Company. Founded in 1989 by Mary Grace Sexton, whose husband was a fourth-generation Florida citrus grower, Natalie's built its name on minimally processed, small-batch juice with exactly one ingredient: fresh oranges. No added sugar, no preservatives, no artificial anything. It's been recognized multiple times by outlets like Good Housekeeping and Real Simple as one of the best-tasting orange juices sold in the U.S., which matters because clean and bland aren't the same thing. Worth knowing, in the interest of full transparency, the company went through a rocky stretch under private equity ownership before its founding family reacquired and rebuilt it, and it has recently become part of a partnership with Perricone Farms, a citrus grower group. The company states its sourcing and processing philosophy hasn't changed as a result. It's a good example of something worth remembering with every brand on this list. Ownership structures shift over time, even for the good guys, so it's worth occasionally checking the label again rather than assuming a brand you trusted 5 years ago is sourced the same way today. Best option number 1. Uncle Matt's Organic. Founded in 1999 by Matt McLean, a fourth-generation Florida citrus grower, this is the most rigorously certified orange juice brand widely available in the U.S. Every bottle is USDA certified organic, meaning no synthetic pesticides or herbicides were used in growing the fruit. But Uncle Matt's goes a step further than the organic seal alone. It's independently certified glyphosate residue-free by the Detox Project, the first juice company in the country to earn that specific verification. That's not a claim about farming practice the way the organic label is. It's a claim about the finished product, tested and confirmed to be below the laboratory's detection limit for the actual chemical this entire list has been circling around. The company was also the first juice maker in the U.S. to become a certified B Corporation, a designation that requires meeting verified standards for social and environmental performance, not just self-reported marketing language. No added sugar, no preservatives, no flavor packs, no peel oil added back in. If the goal is the smallest possible gap between what the label says and what an independent lab can confirm, this is currently the strongest case on the market. Here's the one rule worth keeping next time you're standing in the juice aisle. Read past the front of the carton. Natural, pure, and fresh squeezed are marketing words with no fixed legal definition under FDA policy, and more than one major brand on this list has already been sued over exactly that gap, in some cases paying out millions of dollars without ever admitting the label was false. The words that actually mean something because they require independent verification to use are USDA Organic and a specific glyphosate residue-free certification like the one from the Detox Project. Those aren't just descriptions sitting on a carton. They're audits performed by a party with no financial stake in the outcome. A shorter version of the same rule: if a juice brand's cleanest claim is a word instead of a certification, treat it as marketing until proven otherwise. And if you want to know what's really changed in the orange juice aisle over the last 2 decades, it isn't the fruit. Oranges haven't changed. It's how many hands, how many storage tanks, how many reconstructed flavor compounds, and how many international suppliers now sit between the grove and your glass. Check the label the next time you're at the store. Not just the front of the carton, the ingredient panel on the side. If what you find there changes how you think about what's in your fridge, sending this along to someone who drinks a glass of it every single morning is probably the most useful thing you can do with it.